Welcome to our live stream. Arroyo and Bream. We're here to see the book, Love Stories of the Bible Speak. Shannon, I'm so delighted.
Me too, Raymond. I wish it was in person, but I know you've been busy promoting your new book, and God bless you for taking a little break to talk about the one I'm putting into the world this week too. We're busy authors.
I am so excited. Tell me, first of all, and I think I'm frozen on screen. I'm sort of frightened at the picture that's just frozen there, but tell me, eventually the camera will catch up, I hope. Why love stories, Shannon? Why frame these Bible stories this way? I know there's a lot of relationship advice, which we'll get to in a little bit, but why frame it this way?
You know, in my last two books, Women of the Bible Speak and Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak, the women were the starring roles in a lot of these stories, but men played really important roles too. And we realized some of these stories really were deep love stories that we could dig into more, bring in the man's perspective, and just take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there are some beautiful relationships that give us really good advice. There's some really messy, bad ones, which are also good for us to learn from. So there are beautiful love stories in the Bible. There are strong friendships in the Bible. And of course, we're all commanded to love each other as ourselves. So there's a lot of love theme all through the Bible, including that I think the whole Bible is God's love story to us, to humanity.
Right. Well, you have that line from Galatians at the beginning of the book. You say the entire law is summed up in a single command: love your neighbor as yourself. And that really is a nice theme to sort of set off everything that follows. Okay, I'm reading this on the plane. And the Song of Solomon, I have to admit, I've read it a few times. I didn't read it like this. This is some hot stuff, Shannon. I mean, but it really does speak to romantic love and the yearning two people have for each other before marriage.
Yeah. And the thing is that a lot of people it's tricky to tackle it. You don't really learn a lot about it in Sunday school. They're like, wait till you're a little bit older to read about that. In fact, I note in the book, there was a biblical scholar, long ago who said, if you're struggling with lust, I don't think that you should read this book. He didn't think it was good for everybody to read it, but it's in the Bible for a reason. And it is this romantic yearning between two people who not only really admire each other physically, which they make clear, but they're also admiring each other's character. We see the meaning of the family. Like, this is going to be a serious relationship. And, God's not looking around like, what are these kids up to down there? I mean, he created romance and marriage and desire and all of those things. So I think it's good for people of faith to talk about it.
What I love about the book, Shannon, is not only do you remind us of bits of the Bible that either, as you said, are avoided in Sunday school, you don't hear many preachers talking of, but you draw out relationship advice throughout the book that really can be instantly practically applied to our own relationships. I mean, using the Song of Solomon, which is, again, it's an explosion of poetic yearning for this other person, whether it's the bride or the groom. Tell me how that song is really a reminder to be a cheerleader and the prime supporter of your spouse.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you don't want anybody else taking that position. I mean, you want to be the number one fan in your spouse's life. I mean, you want them to feel valued and cherished in the beginning. It's all, for most people, hot and heavy. You have some kind of physical attraction there. But we can't just let our relationships get on autopilot. We need to tell our spouse how much we care about them. And listen, we're called to be servants to each other, to really be looking out for the other person's good. And, I think about the fact that these poetic phrases, like, tell me, I got to up my game when it comes to love letters. Like, you just be like, hey, Shell, have a great day, XOXO. I mean, like, this is like your arms are like strong bands of gold and your teeth are like the whitest goats in the flock. I mean, it's very descriptive and we may think it's kind of corny, but I love that it was put out there to show, like, make an effort, tell somebody why you love and admire them. And that shouldn't just be the beginning of your relationship, but we should make an effort at that throughout.
Well, I love the line, and I pulled it. It says, like an apple among the trees of the forest is my beloved among young men, and his fruit is sweet to my taste, the bride writes of her beloved. Again, that, yes, it's heightened, but it's also, it speaks of the deep passion and respect that they have for one another. There's also another thing, and I knew the Lillian Hellman play, The Little Foxes, but in fact, I met my wife doing that play. I cast her in The Little Foxes. So for us, this has particular resonance, but it says, the line is, catch for the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, are vineyards that are in bloom. What does that mean? What does that speak to?
I look at it as the little foxes that can mess up your relationship, the things that can get in there and cause harm. And this is kind of the couple asking others, like, help us to get these foxes out of our vineyards, out of our relationship. And there's a great pastor who, the funny thing is, I was working on this chapter, and I promise you, Raymond, every time I was working on a specific chapter and maybe struggling, I would go to church and it would be on that topic. I visited church with friends, and I walk in and the pastor is preaching on Song of Solomon. I'm like, hallelujah. Thank you, Lord, because I could use some help with this one. But he was really smart about that, and he talks about the little foxes and how we need to think about how those are the things that can get under each other's skin, or whether it's distractions of work or even good things like children. I mean, just trying to balance all of these things so that you are also investing in your marriage relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to move on to a less than delightful pairing. They're kind of the mother of all hookups, Shannon. Samson and Delilah.
Yeah.
Now, here is a guy, a judge, a mighty king of Israel, set apart by God. He's also a creature of lust. But the question is, why didn't he leave Delilah? Particularly as she betrays him repeatedly.
Right. So yeah, one of these things is he was set apart from before he was born. An angel came and told his parents that he's going to be set apart. He has to take these special vows. And one of those that everybody's familiar with, if they know the story at all, is that he was not to cut his hair.
Right.
And so he had really played fast and loose with some of the other vows, but here he is. In lust, I think, with Delilah, and she keeps saying, what's the secret of your strength? Tell me. And each time he would tell her something phony, she would have a band of men show up and try it. And then they would realize it wasn't really working because he would throw them off and his strength was there. And she was crying to Samson, and she's saying, why are you embarrassing me this way? And I'm like, embarrassing you in front of who? These enemies that are going to try to take him. So why he finally gave in is a mystery, but he was so weak when it came to women, it appears in the story. But I do love, and maybe you'll get to this, at the end of his story, there is some redemption. Like there is for all of us, even when we make messes.
Well, I love that you point out in the book that he had perhaps moved too far away from God to realize what was happening in his own relationships, and how that applies to us, that you kind of lose sight, you lose perspective, you lose reality.
Yeah, you can. And the fact is that when you are, drifting with any number of things, we become deadened, we become dulled, I think, to the Holy Spirit's pull on our heart. And whether it's conviction or a sense of right and wrong or whatever it is, I mean, the more that we dabble in the things that we know are not right, and we kind of deaden our conscience. And that, you're right, that probably is what happened to Samson, because, a lot of people forget, and I did until I went back to really dig in and study, that he had a first marriage that was also a complete disaster. So we know that women were his weakness. And he really did get away from these vows that he had taken until he was at the place where maybe he thought, oh, even if I do the last one and I let them cut off my hair, I'll still have the strength. Maybe he'd become so detached from his relationship with God that he had started to believe that he was his own source of strength.
Yeah. I have to move on to Adam and Eve, another couple you highlight here. And let's contrast that, Adam and Eve, with Mary and Joseph, because she's the new Eve in many ways. But it all begins with a man and a woman in love. I mean, that is the first story we're treated to. That is really the opening of salvation history. And of course, it ends in the same way. That book ends. Talk to me about that. And that's what I loved about the book being about love, because you're right. It is a love story between a man and a woman, really. You're instruments of God from the start.
Yeah. And when you think about Adam and Eve, all through Genesis and the creation story, we're seeing each time God completes a day of creation of animals, the waters, whatever it was, he says, and it was good. But the first time that we see that he thinks something isn't good is when he realizes Adam is alone and there's nothing there. There's no animal. There's nothing that's going to be a companion for him. And he's like, that's not good. And of course, then the creation of Eve. And I love the language that if you really look at it, what Eve is described as is the word Ezer, which it's used throughout the Old Testament. You can look and see that it's a helper, it's a rescuer. It is not a delicate, subordinate, lesser kind of person. I mean, Adam and Eve were both created in God's likeness, but they were paired together. Yes, they have different strengths and weaknesses, but they were partners in this thing. And we see the tragedies that they walk through. With Mary and Joseph, I love that we see this this humility. Mary rightly gets a lot of attention
Mm.
as the mother of our Savior, but I think sometimes we don't look enough at what Joseph went through. He chose to stay with Mary when he could have walked away from that relationship in those days when she came up pregnant.
Mm.
It wasn't by him, but he didn't. He was visited by the angel too, and he said, "No, I'm gonna accept this assignment joyfully and move forward with her." And who knows what thoughts or plans he had for their life together? But I like to say he became like the world's greatest stepdad, because here he is now raising this Messiah that was not biologically his son, but fully committing to being his father and his earthly provider. And Mary and Joseph went on to have other children. And I think, Joseph's a real hero of the Bible too, for the way that he protected them, he provided for them, and he stepped in to be that earthly father. That required to me a lot of sacrificial love and humility.
Yeah, the silent night, they call him at times, because he
Yeah.
may have been the real silent night. And I remember years ago, Mother Angelica saying he was probably a younger man than he's often thought of or depicted as,
True.
because how can an old man walk all the way from Bethlehem to Egypt and protect the family? Okay, an old guy probably couldn't do that. So
Yeah.
good tip there. Tell me about Esther. Now, you've written about Esther before. She was married to a royal on a kind of Parisian or Persian rather version of The Bachelor.
Right.
It was a competition among the women. She saves her people, and she gives us a lesson on the nature of marriage. What is that lesson? She really had to win her husband over.
She did. And listen, she did come into this marriage in a totally bizarre way that, listen, until the advent of reality TV, we would not have thought it was possible, but kind of this Persian beauty pageant on steroids. But she did have to hide her Jewish heritage. She took that advice from Mordecai, who raised her when she was orphaned, this relative of hers. And so she had to be, one thing we do see is that everybody at the palace, all the people who kept in contact with her, they really admired her. They really liked her. They were rooting for her. So she had to be wise in the way that she probably was aware of palace politics and those kinds of things. We know that her husband, who was definitely attracted to her, only grew in his admiration or connection for her. Now, King Xerxes, at the beginning of the book, is a hothead. He is arrogant. He's
Right.
not the greatest, probably, husband material. But by the end, because of her winsomeness, I think her wisdom, her respectfulness to him, and we see she goes to him very wisely and smartly, with this respectful tone before she makes this big ask that's going to save her people. But by then we see Xerxes is very enamored of her, because he says, "I'll give you up to half of my kingdom," which in those days would have been unthinkable for a woman to have that kind of power or wealth.
Right.
But I think what we see is the faithfulness, the steadiness of a wife in unusual and difficult circumstances, in some way won over Xerxes and his heart. And I think you can be in a difficult marriage. I'm not talking about abuse or something that you should walk away from and get away from. But we all hit rough patches in marriage. We're not perfect spouses. Our spouses aren't perfect. But I think by staying...
Speak for yourself, Shannon Bream.
Well, you
Speak
may.
for yourself.
I call your wife.
That's
But-
right. Rebecca will tell a very different story. But go on. I'm sorry.
I just think by being humble and respectful and trusting God through this process, she was really able to win Xerxes over in a way that his first queen was not able to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm going to ask you this question. And we're talking about Shannon's brand new book. It's out now just this week. Love Stories of the Bible Speak. Now, why the speak part? I get the love stories of the Bible. Why add the speak? What is that about, Shannon?
I think it's about bringing these stories into modern life, because they do speak to us over the centuries and over the ages. The things that people went through, the heartache they went through, the infidelity, the infertility, the widowhood, the financial ruin, the loss of a child, all of these things we see in Scripture, and we see that God grieves. We see places where Christ's heart is broken. Think about the death of his friend Lazarus, or even when he happened upon the widow of Nain, who had lost her son. We hear that his heart was grieved. So God understands our suffering. And for me, the speak part is just that all of these stories and these hurts and God's promises and the love and the redemption over time, all of that is just as relevant in 2023 as it was centuries ago.
No, that's what I love. And you do bring it home. And I love, again, the practicality of the book. You tell these stories and reset them really for us so that we look at them anew, and you look at them in a new way. But then you extract a lesson or two that we can really apply to our own relationships, whether it's, and then you get into Daniel and his friends. It's also about friendship. Talk to me about that before we go to all the questions, and they are streaming in. You can keep sending them. We will try to get to as many as we
Yes,
can.
I'd love to answer questions.
Yeah.
I love Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Not only because we were kids, we would laugh over trying to pronounce the names, and there was a little Sunday school song that we would sing. But these four young men were taken away from their home country and their home people, and they were put into the service of King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. He saw that they were good, strong specimens. They were smart young men, but started to try to strip them of their Hebrew identity, you know, maybe their language, the food they could eat, all the cultural things that tied them to the Hebrew people and to their God, which they were not willing to compromise on. And we see over and over again, many different situations, how these friends stuck together, they prayed together. We all need that in our lives. We all want to be that, but we need to be that friend if we're going to have those kinds of friends too. But of course, that big story with them where they end up, because they refused to bow down to King Nebuchadnezzar's phony idol, this gold thing that he had built, he's throwing them into the fire. And I love what they say before that happens. First of all, none of the friends flake. They stick together and they say, we know our God can save us, but even if he doesn't, we will never serve your gods. They go into the furnace. There's a fourth person in there that many scholars and people believe was Christ himself visiting with them. They come out, there's not a hair singed on their head. They don't smell like smoke. And Nebuchadnezzar is forced to recognize that their God is the true God. And so I love how these friends, through many, many trials, and that's the biggest one, they never peeled off, they never betrayed each other. And I can only believe that they found enormous strength in sticking together.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful story. And again, the allegory of the fire, when they're in the fire of existence, of daily life, and they stay together and they rely on God. Again, the practicality of the stories that you bring to life, I love. Okay, I'm going to shut up because there's so many questions coming in. Okay, Gulfport, Mississippi. Dawn is asking, how did you first think of the idea to publish love stories of the Bible?
Okay, I got to tell you, a few years ago, Fox came to me and said, we are thinking about starting a book publishing idea. We know that faith is very big for you and we want to get into this space. Would you be interested? And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've never done something like this, but it was an immediate yes. It felt like an opportunity from God to share these stories. And so we just had a plan for the first book, Women of the Bible Speak, and had no idea how it would just connect with people. So there are Bible studies with it. I had a couple of men stop me at church a few weeks back and say, hey, by the way, we did your Women of the Bible Speak study in our men's group because we wanted to do it sort of as a tribute or an honor to our moms, our wives, and our daughters, so that we could look at these stories that are so special to them and from their perspective. So we decided to move forward with Mothers and Daughters of the Bible Speak. And we were like, there's still stories to tell. And let's bring the men in on this, love stories of the Bible Speak, and get to the friendships as well. And, you know, to me, this is secretly, although I keep saying it, it's not really a secret. Like, this is my favorite one for whatever reason. I've loved them all, but this one just brought me such joy. And I just really enjoyed studying it. So it's been a natural progression. And I hope you enjoy the latest installment.
Yeah, no, it's a fun book. It's a fun read, and it'll deepen your knowledge of not only the Bible, but your relationship and how you fit into this stretch and story of salvation history. Okay, Ted is asking a question that I have to admit I don't really understand, but I will ask it anyway.
Let's give
Our 25th wedding anniversary is coming up on April 4th. Any suggestion for a romantic date I can give to my bride?
First of all, Ted, happy anniversary to you.
Happy anniversary,
We
Ted.
love that. I do tell a story in the book that I think is important because whatever your spouse, you know, means something to their heart, I would say that's where you go for this date. I made the mistake early on in my relationship with Sheldon with putting together a treasure hunt with scavengers, a hunt, like maps and the whole thing. And it ends at this one place and we have dinner. And I really thought he was going to be so impressed. Like, that's the coolest thing. This is so great. And he was sort of like, thanks. I mean, scavenger hunt is not Sheldon Bream's love language. I know better now what makes him happy. And so I think whatever you know is meaningful to your spouse, that's the date that you should do.
Oh, that's what he meant, a romantic outing. I thought
yes,
any suggestion for a romantic date, I didn't know if he was looking for an alternative or a date on the calendar. I didn't know what that meant. So
I gotcha. Well, hopefully, Ted, that answered your question. Thank you.
I hope so. Carol in Virginia is asking, what made you want to come out with a third book in this series? And is there a main takeaway you want readers to gain?
I do think it's that the verse that I have in the beginning of the book, we love because God first loved us. So all the things that, all the psychologists and folks out there tell us we're searching for is connection, to see and be seen, to love and to be loved. And I thought, gosh, the Bible gives us so much about that. And even though people don't think of it as a romance novel or guidebook, I thought these stories are really special, like highlighting Joseph, and not just there, but also talking about what he had done. Song of Solomon, it's tricky, but it's in there for a reason. And I thought, people are searching for love. We have shows about love. We have books and movies and songs about love. So why not give people a look at what the Bible has to say, not only about our relationships, but how God loves us with such a pure love that he then expects us to find ways to turn around in our own relationships and with strangers too, that whole love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes, and you spend the second half of the book talking about not romantic love, but the love of friends and these amazing friendships that populate the Bible, which largely touch on self-sacrifice, concern with the other, and God's plan for the two of you moving forward, as friends, a different type of love.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are different kinds of love in the Bible. And of course, the one that talks about God is agape, which is like unconditional, limitless. He's there for you. He is rooting for you. He's drawing you to him. And I find that very reassuring. Like, I mess up. I ask for forgiveness every day in my prayers. And there are things in my life, of course, I regret or would take back. But God doesn't look at us any differently. He's like, I love you. Nothing's going to change that.
Yeah. Sarah is asking from Indiana, in researching the topic, how did some of the biblical truths impact your own love story and your marriage?
I think it's that returning to the idea of sacrificial love, the idea that, Christ talks about in the New Testament about first shall be last shall be first. And I have a quote in there from Sheldon, my husband, like if you're both doing everything you can to put the other person first and make them happy, like you're both going to end up happy. If you're the biggest cheerleader, if you can put away some of your selfishness, like that's always a reminder to me to look at, what is important in these love stories. And so I really enjoyed researching them, getting to know them better. There's a very obscure story, but it's about David and Abigail. I hope people will check that out because that was just a reminder to me too, that women who are in difficult marriages, you can be the peacemaker in that. You can be the one to rise up and be the savior of your household in some ways. If you read about that story, you'll see what I mean. So, every time I dive into the Bible, believe me, plenty of conviction for myself and how I can be a better wife, friend, employee, daughter, all those things.
Okay. Marcus from Florida is asking, Marcus from Florida, the home state of Shannon Bream.
I love it.
What are qualities that you look for when choosing friends and confidants?
I do think confidants gets to the right word because I think it's got to be somebody you trust. And I talk about in the book how I have a couple of, groups, two groups of girlfriends that there's a little bit of overlap with some of them, but these two distinct groups that get together and do things. And we always say cone of silence, like that we can come and share our best and worst things. So I think it's really that loyalty and that trustworthiness. But I do, we should have all different kinds of friends. I think that's good. People who will challenge us. And that whole idea that iron sharpens iron, I think is very important too. But listen, my friends are all really funny too. And I don't know, that's just a side effect. But I think sense of humor eases a lot of the pains in our life and connects us with people too.
I agree. And it's critical in a marriage.
Yep.
If you can't laugh,
it's over.
Give it up. Yeah,
You're not going to make it more than 5 minutes.
How do you stand? Who is this writing? Hold on one second. Kathy from Texas. How do you stand up for your faith in a secular work environment? Any advice, especially to young females just starting out?
Yes, Kathy, such a great question. Thank you very much for that. I've talked about this, that there were times early on in my career that I thought I had to wear a certain thing or be a certain way, put up with something that I really probably shouldn't have. As far as comments and flirtations, and you're always trying to find your place, especially as a young woman. Where do I stand up for myself? Where do I let something go? Where's the line? And I think you have to be really strong about that. And there were people who told me early on, like, you're just not fun because, if people don't see you as quote unquote sexy, then they're not going to want to watch you do a TV show. And I was told at one point, you're too churchy was the word that got back to me, the critique.
Wow.
And there came a point where I said, you know what? I got to be at peace with that, because I can't sacrifice who I am and what I believe God has called me to. He's my heavenly Father, and I shouldn't be chasing the approval of worldly people. And that was a real check on me. I had to say, nope, I'm just going to draw the line in the sand. And if this, where I'm at this moment, making this decision, like I never have another promotion from here or anything else. Great. This is where God has assigned me, and I need to embrace that. There's plenty of work to do, plenty of people I can serve and I can help right here. So I think once I made that decision in my mind, that I was very much at peace. Like, I'm not going to apologize for my faith. I'm not going to hide it, but I'm also going to use it in a way that hopefully people will see, like, I'm for them and I'm here to serve them, because that was Christ's example.
And Shannon, I should thank you while we're here together in front of everybody. When I came in for many days in those low crop tops, you were the one who said, put a shirt and tie and have some dignity for yourself. And I've done that. And I've tried.
Look, it paid off for you.
Yeah, look what's happened. I went right to the middle. Anyway, Lindsay from Michigan is saying, what's been the highlight or pinch me moment in your career?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I am one of those nerds who I love going to the arguments at the Supreme Court, because it's a small courtroom. They don't have cameras. They don't have anything in there. So I feel privileged to go in there to watch these amazing arguments. I really get into it, but to come out and to share with people what's happened and why it matters to their life, I really love that. But, I've interviewed presidents. For the State of the Union this year, I was invited to go over and have lunch with President Biden with a few other journalists on the day of the State of the Union. And trust me, as a kid from Tallahassee, Florida, who grew up like wearing hand-me-downs and never was cool, to walk onto the grounds of the White House and think, I'm going to have lunch with the president. I mean, I still wonder how that happened, but I can only think it's from God's goodness, kind of his kind hand guiding me there.
Well, we are talking to Shannon Bream, in case you're just joining us, about her new book, Love Stories of the Bible Speak, and she is speaking. And we're delighted to be with you live. You can get your signed edition below, just there. There's a link, or actually the link's above. I think it's above. Yeah, it says get your signed copy at the link above. So we're pointing up, Shannon. There we go.
Okay.
So you can get it there. And she personally signed these. And Premier does such a great job. They'll send them right to your home. And you don't have to worry about standing in line at a book signing in the heat or waiting for hours. Anna from California is asking, what's it been like being the host of Fox News Sunday? And has it been a transition for you?
Yes, for sure. And what a storied show that I walked into. I mean, such a blessing that there was already this incredible team there. One of our folks on staff has been there for 24 years. She knows everyone in Washington inside and out. So I walked into a very well-oiled machine, but the nice thing has been that there's been an openness. Like, let's try some different things. Let's have on an athlete or a musician or somebody different. Part of the show is always going to be political. But we're going to try to do things that do bring in faith and, entertainment and culture and all of those things too. So it's been a fun learning experience, I think, as we go. It's very different than any show I've ever done, because instead of maybe a 3 or 4 minute interview, some of them are 10 or 12 minutes. You really get time with people to kind of drill down on their position and what motivates them and where they're going with legislation or a plan or policy. And when they're BSing you, because you have, all of this time, you can really go back through their record and say, well, you may say that now, but this is how you voted in 1985. I mean, it's a much different conversation, but it's been a lot of fun. And the Fox News Sunday team is incredible. I'm just glad I got to join them and do something that's a little different. It's kind of, I would have said years ago, my dream job. So really I feel very blessed to land.
So you made it. I love it. Okay. This is Megan from Illinois, who asks an interesting question. It's a personal question. What disciplines have you put in place to help you flourish professionally and spiritually? Is there a routine?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's the same thing. That applies to both. And that in the morning, I have to start with prayer, with Bible reading. I have some really great devotionals that I love, and journaling. I really like journaling. There's something about putting things to paper, even if I'm copying down a verse that I want to try to memorize, or some nugget that I really got that morning from my reading. And prayer. And a lot of times in the morning too, I will listen to praise and worship music or positive Christian music, because I know, Raymond, we know what we're walking into, all of us, when we walk into the world for the day. So to me, putting on that armor and finding my peace and my place of rest, like, Lord, do you know what's going to happen today? And some days are really difficult and some days are joyful, but help me always just to stay rooted in you, because the winds will blow, they will buffet us. So for me, putting down those roots in the morning is really important. I'm a big reader and researcher. I always have been.
Hmm.
I really love that. And I think for this job, that's just a necessity. So I always have piles of stuff. I tried to clean it up for you now, but I always have piles
It
and piles
looks
of stuff.
it looks Oprah already back there. I got to tell you,
Yeah.
you look like Oprah.
Don't look back over here.
Flowers. Yeah, I've got a TV and a window. That's all I do.
Getting it done.
Stacy in Georgia asks, with some marriage, sexuality, etc., how can we not become numb and desensitized to it all? Did you come away with anything in your exploration of the Bible and these love stories just to kind of center people anew on God's plan for us rather than our plan for ourselves?
Yeah, it just reminded me that, listen, nothing's a surprise to him. He's invented everyone and everything and created us, under the sun. So I feel like, God's looking down on us, and he's not doing so with an iron fist to say, I don't want you to have any fun in your life. I'm going to give you all of these rules. To me, the more I study the Bible, the more I see like he's about giving us freedom. I mean, I know that there are things in my life that I've struggled with, and I'm like, gosh, when I'm really fighting with that, it will tell me it's going to be fun, and it might be in the short term, but it's like a weight around my neck. What God is saying to me is like, bring me all that stuff. Bring me your burdens, bring me your struggles, the things that you really have a hard time with, and let me give you a lighter load. So to me, the Bible is a great place, the only place for me to anchor myself and to feel like he's going to ease my burdens, and he's going to help me stay true to his true north compass the more time I spend in the word. I'm trying to think of the verse that I memorized it, and I was reading it the other day, but was talking about the more the time that we spend in the word and renewing our minds. I think it's Romans 12. Like then you can test and know what is the good will of God. So the more time we spend with the real thing, I think the less the imitators and the distractions will be able to get us off track.
This is Beverly writing in. She's a former elementary
Yes, God bless you, Beverly. Yes, I think
enough of them, though. I'm wondering, well, you got baby Jesus.
I think about like Jairus, the leader, and his daughter that was dying. You can tell that story. Think about what Jesus said too. Like, if you wrong a child, better that you have a millstone hung around your neck and thrown in the ocean. Like, I do think, and God asks us to come to him with the faith of a child. So I think there are a lot of themes there. It's a good possibility.
There you go. The only thing Shannon won't be doing is pagans of the Bible speak. That one she's not doing.
I'm going to skip that. Although you can find some of that stuff in the Old Testament.
Well, you can find some of that down the bookshelf file.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I think, we've had workbooks that have come from each of the books. We also have had coloring books, which it's funny because when we were kids, Raymond, that was to keep us busy, right? But now adults really enjoy these coloring books. I can't take any of the credit for the artwork. It's beautiful, but they pull from the content of the books. But yes, maybe there will be a children's version of each of these books at some point, or maybe its own.
Yeah, children of the Bible speak. There it is. Ellie from Missouri is asking, how did you and your husband meet?
We both went to Liberty University undergrad, and we were both there the same amount of time, but just never met until our senior year. We had a friend who was constantly saying, you guys would be great together. We were dating other people. It was never the right time. Finally, our senior year, it was the homecoming game. It was my husband's birthday, October 30th. And she went and grabbed him and said, wait right here. She's here. I'm going to grab her. And we met at that football game, and we didn't start dating right away because, again, we were dating other people. But I was like, he's a nice guy. I had an implosion of my relationship over Christmas to this person that was not exactly who I thought he was. But that's what dating is about. You figure that out. And I came back from the Christmas break in January, and I said to another mutual friend, and I said, is he dating anyone? I know I'm going off to law school, but he's cute. What's the story there? Don't tell him I'm asking, which immediately she said, guess who's asking about you? And blew my cover. But so he asked me on a date after, some conversations, and I didn't know what to think of him. He was a baseball player. And I got to tell you, the athletes had a little bit of a player reputation on and off the field. So I said, I will go on this date with this guy because, I'm going off to law school, but he seems cute. We'll see what happens. And that first date I saw, oh my goodness, this guy is not who I thought. Now I'm in trouble because this is like husband material. And I knew from the beginning. He went home that night after our first date and told his roommates, I'm going to marry her. It took me a little bit longer, but he was right.
Wow. That's incredible that he knew so
He
quickly.
said that night, and his roommate's like, "You're crazy," but they were groomsmen in the
And
wedding.
he was right.
It was right.
Okay. Amanda from Texas is asking any advice to a single girl waiting on her own love story.
Yes, Amanda, thank you so much for that question. And I do talk about that in different parts of the book, how all of us, whatever our journey is, wherever we are, we need to be a community of people who are encouragers. I've got single friends, so they've got married friends, and we all need to be encouraging each other, because sometimes the waiting for something can seem so difficult, especially if it's a good thing like marriage. And I do believe that for the vast majority of us, that's what God has planned. He wants us to be able to have that connection, that relationship. I know a lot of people who have not gotten married in their 20s, it's maybe even 30s or 40s, and they found the exact right person, and then the waiting made sense for them. And I think it can be tough because the world does want to sell you other options for a less than ideal relationship. So I feel you, and I love, Amanda, that you're thinking and I'm sure praying and being somebody who is faithful in the waiting, because I think we should acknowledge that that can be a really difficult part of life, the waiting. But I'd say the more time that you spend with the Lord, and the more time that you feel strong in your own spiritual walk, in your own relationships, your own fun, to the point where you don't need a relationship to complete you, you're going to be the best addition to someone's life. And you'll only accept the very best person into your life when it's already so full. So, Amanda, I will pray that someone is coming your way, sent by God. Is Raymond frozen?
I'm back.
He's back.
I'm back.
He's back from frozen
Like
tundra.
magic. Yeah, there was a little glitch there, but I hope I'm back. Shannon, tell us about Ruth and Boaz, who are featured in the book. Now, these are two figures that often get glossated over. You don't hear a lot about them. You draw some important lessons about these two characters that are sort of overlooked.
Yeah, and I love Ruth and Boaz. So she's a widow when we meet her, in terrible circumstances. So her mother-in-law is Naomi. Naomi's husband he's died. Both of her sons have died. So it's now her and these two daughters-in-law. And in that day and time, they would have been completely vulnerable. So no provider for you economically, no protector for you physically. And Naomi says to her young daughters-in-law, like, go find another family. You can start over, and they, have children and find a man, which would have been totally acceptable and what would have been expected. So Ruth says, no, I'm going to stay with you. And so Naomi takes her back to her homeland. So Ruth comes in as an outsider, but she's chosen this poverty and wanting to help care for her mother-in-law when there would be no prospects essentially for her. She's an outsider to the land. She has no money, no connections, and she goes to work in the field, gleaning for whatever the professional harvesters had left behind. And it's at that time that it turns out she's gleaning in Boaz's field, and he sees her. He asks about her. He gets to know the story that she's doing this very selfless, honorable thing in following Naomi and trying to provide for them, knowing they're just going to live in poverty and it's going to be a very difficult life. And Boaz is attracted to this nobility, this honor of what she's doing. And it turns out the two of them wind up, and you never know how your story is going to end, but she's a widow who gets this second chance at love. And from them, Naomi is blessed. They have a child. She counts it an enormous joy to get this grandchild. And that lineage is in the lineage of Christ. And so Boaz says to her, like when she comes to him in this ancient ritual, when there was a distant relative who could possibly step in to be the provider, and he says to her, you've come to me. I've seen your honorable ways. You're not chasing after the younger men or different people. And he just found such great character in her. And it's a beautiful love story about that second chance at love, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Shannon, what do you hear? Oh, I'm frozen again, but you can hear me.
You're back, yes.
Yes, you hear me, but look at the horrible picture. Anyway, I'll reconnect after I ask this question. When you're working on this, how long does it take you? Once you get an idea that I'm going to be writing about women of the Bible or love stories of the Bible, how do you figure that out? How do you discern?
It's kind of a collaborative process. So Harpercollins, I work with their team, and we kind of think about who should we include. So in the first book, I'm always fighting for somebody, and I really fought for Rahab in the first book, who was known as a prostitute, but a very faithful key member in assisting the Hebrew people, and an enormous victory that she kind of stuck herself out and was a bold, brave person. And I paired her with Queen Esther because they both were these women who boldly stepped forward in the moment of truth to help save the Hebrew people. So it's always a back and forth about who we're going to include. In this book, I really wanted to include the story of Hosea and Gomer, which is a difficult one. He's married to her,
Yeah.
she's unfaithful. And it really was a picture of God talking about Israel and like, listen, you walk away from me, but I'm going to keep pursuing you. So Hosea is in this marriage with Gomer. She's unfaithful. She runs away. He goes at some point and he pays off the debts that she's incurred. He buys her back out of whatever her terrible situation was. And it's such a beautiful picture of, God's love for us. He was telegraphing that. I think you see that with Israel in the Old Testament and the New Testament, Christ for the church, for all of us to save us. So we all want to think we're Hosea. We want to be that person in the story, but a lot of times we're Gomer. And so I thought it's a tricky
Yeah.
story, but I really fought to include it because I think in the messiest, most flawed stories, there are some of the deepest lessons. So it's always a discussion back and forth of who we're going to include, but I'm always glad when we get in the non-traditional stories too.
Well, I love that you also take the time to find and weave in your personal discoveries and your personal relationships, which I think makes it more relevant to all of us because we can relate to the friendship difficulties, the marriage advice. All of that is kind of woven in. So it's more than just a Bible study or a kind of retelling of these stories. There's even a prayer at the end of each chapter. Why include that? What was that there for?
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing those prayers. I think it helps focus and maybe sum up the entire chapter. Like, God, what can I learn from this? So, in times praying about like Esther and this difficult thing she had to do and step up and make her case to Xerxes when she was fighting for the Jewish people and fighting for her life. The prayer there, like, Lord, help me to be bold, help me to speak into situations that are difficult, and help me to be respectful so I can win over those around me as whatever you have planned and plotted for me to be here in this day, in this moment. So I really like the prayers. So I hope it will kind of focus people into what we can ask God for from that story, what we can learn, how he can bless us with whatever we might need from that story.
We are in our final minutes. I want to remind everybody, if you want a question, I might read one or two more, so get them in. I see them still coming. I want to remind you, you can click on the link above there, and you will find Shannon Bream's actual signature in the front of your book. They will send it to you. Premier Collectibles will send it to you. And if I can get a quick plug in, Shannon, my children's book, The Unexpected Light of Thomas Alva Edison, is also available through Premier Collectibles, and I signed those as well.
It's a 2-for-1. You can get
it's a twofer.
And people were asking about children's book. You have fantastic children's books and young people's books. So yes, a twofer. You can get Raymond's and you can get mine.
And look, what better way to fill your Easter basket than with Shannon Bream with a side of Arroyo?
You throw in a couple of peanut butter, eggs, and you're done.
I'm telling you, malted milk balls, Reese's Pieces, and you, Shannon Bream. What could be better in the Easter basket? Okay, someone's asking here, Lindy from Arizona, what do you and your husband love to do together? Keep it clean, Shannon. And what's a go-to date night idea?
You know what? We love to travel together. That's something we really enjoy, whether it's close to home. I love a road trip. We go somewhere like 3 or 4 hours in the car. We have really good conversations, and I really appreciate and enjoy that because you kind of have fewer of the distractions, and we sing songs together like weirdos. I will harmonize. So even just a simple little road trip, we really enjoyed those. But date night for us, I mean, it's pretty simple. He's an amazing cook, and I'm an amazing eater. So that really works out. But, anytime there are, around Washington, Raymond, there's always like a little black tie thing here and there. So any chance I can sneak him into getting a tuxedo and I get gussied up in an evening gown once or twice a year, that's always fun for something different.
That's important. Rebecca and I try to do that in New Orleans. We have many opportunities to put the finery on and get gussied up. But it is important, I think, to do that as a couple. It keeps you in a good, rhythm of presenting yourselves well, and the adventure of mixing and mingling with people is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we have this saying in our house, like, keep the romance alive. So we really feel like, there are doors on bathrooms for a reason, and your spouse doesn't need to know every single thing about every single thing. Not that you would hide anything from them, but we that's one of our funny sayings. We say, like, keep the romance alive, because you got to try to do that. It's messy sometimes, and sometimes you care for each other when you're really sick and all these different things. But I like to think that I have a little bit of mystery about me from Sheldon.
We have to keep just a little tad in private and in check. Final question to you. When as you're talking to people about this new series, well, the series is now well established, but the new book, Love Stories of the Bible Speak, what are you hearing from them? What are they looking for, and how do you think this book fills that need?
You know what, I've heard from two different couples who had early copies of the book who said to me that they're doing it together. They're reading it to each other and having conversations. And I'm like, oh, I love that. Because I think that you can do this in any kind of study group or on your own. But I love that couples are going to dive into this and get through it together. That just really blessed me. I thought, I love that, because if it can encourage us to have better relationships, whether it's those romantic relationships or to value our friends in a deeper and better way, I think there are all kinds of beautiful things that we can learn. And I love that husbands and wives or couples are going to do these books together.
Yeah. And you know what? Just to complete this circle of love and love stories, Shannon Bream, I can't tell you all of the people who are writing in. Love you both. Love you, Shannon. Shannon Seuss. They want you to do the Children of the Bible.
Okay.
Yeah, now you're Doctoressa Seuss. Pretty good. Yeah. But so many people saying how much they love you, and we love you too. And I think that's true. And as you read the book, your spirit shines through. And it's a calm, joyous spirit. And I love that about all of these books. And it's rare and hard to capture somebody's sensibility, their tone, their feeling in life. This book manages to capture a little Shannon Bream in between the study and the practical wisdom along the way. I'll let you close it out.
Yes, I'm not afraid to share the personal, even embarrassing stories where I've gotten things wrong, because I think, we're all just humans and we're in this journey together. So it's been a blessing to me to write these stories. I hope they will encourage you folks at home. And Raymond, lots of love to you too. And thank you for being with me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Look, it was a joy. This is an early Easter gift for me. So delighted to be with you. You can get copies of Love Stories of the Bible Speak right there up above in that link. You can see it. And I'm delighted that I could be a part of this, Shannon. I wish you such incredible blessings. And you've been a blessing to all of us.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here and including me.
I pray that we will be in Easter baskets together all over the land.
You got it. Edison and Romance of the Bible together again. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now. See you next time,
Have a good night.
Hey, this is John Acuff, New York Times best-selling author of 7 books and someone who's done a live signing. If you like the one you just watched, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. It's full of amazing authors having great conversations and signing books for viewers